virtually. The theme of this LAEA conference poses a challenge to us as academic researchers in and professional practitioners, a questioning of the local and global positioning and relevance of language research and African linguistics. Empirical evidence shows that apart from a few and sparsely located African linguistic researchers, North America and Western Europe are the primary locations of research on our indigenous, national, and regional languages. And yet, with development being based on communication through language, and with more than 2,000 languages being used in Africa, languages should be a highly relevant factor in all sectors of political, social, cultural, and economic life. To make this a reality, the LAEA Conference 2023 discusses the resourcefulness of languages, both local and global, and analyzes the growth of linguistics through research areas in view of the ongoing transformation of African societies and how much it relates to economic development, whether in terms of education, planning, information, technology, legal application, or language science. It offers a broad, interdisciplinary scientific approach to the linguistic dimension of social cultural modernization and economic development in Africa from the ideological and cultural perspective of African and Africanist scholars and practitioners. If the North-dominated scholarship and political discourse on Africa is accused of being generally biased, this conference offers an opportunity of Africans to face squarely Africans' essential ethno-linguistic plurality and diversity challenges in view of the continent's ongoing economic development and the accompanying social, cultural transformation. Colleagues, today we chose to keep our speeches very brief because we have quite a bit of business today. With those few words, allow me to thank the different organizations which have sponsored this conference, particularly Pepsi Cola Company, which has given us the water, Fountain Publishers, who have given us the books and the notebooks, the pens and notebooks, the Center for Language and Communication Science, and our major funder has been none other than our own, the Principal College of Humanities and Social Sciences. We thank all of you who have participated in one way or the other, and I pray that everything goes on well. With those few words, allow me to invite our dear principal to welcome you to this conference. You're welcome, Prof.
Neyanziza nabakenkufu. We were advised to try as much as possible to use all languages. All languages have a status, not just one. So I'm learning from Professor Sauda Namyalo. The president Language Association of Eastern Africa. Welcome to Makerere University. The Dean, School of Languages, Literature and Communication, Professor Sauda Namyalo, our dear keynote speakers for this exciting conference. I'm told some people will be online, our online audience, colleagues, heads of departments in the school, in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. I think we are missing students since they haven't reported. Ladies and gentlemen, I received a warning in the morning. This is not a day for speeches. It's a day for business on empowering communities through language research and teaching for sustainable development. My keywords are about empowering communities and the language issue. As a school, we know that language is a powerful tool for human existence. It can make, it can break, it can build, it can unbuild. And our role as scholars is to ensure that it is deployed as a tool for positive social cohesion and human existence. So as we gather here, we know that as a continent, we are rich in languages, but poor in cashing in on them. It's Ngugi wa Thiong'o who always reminded us that failure to use your language is actually a process of dismembering, and that as we enrich all languages, that is the beginning of remembering ourselves. I congratulate the School of Languages, Literature and Communication for taking this big step amidst all challenges around us. Budget cuts, low morale in the communities, in society generally, some form of anxiety around many other things, including the World Bank. To push this through, it's a very big achievement. And so I would like to thank the Dean, who, amidst all challenges, pushed through with the idea of this conference. The convener, Professor Edith Natkunda Togboa, and the entire organizing committee in the school and the School of Languages, Literature and Communication. So as a college, we know that we are the powerhouse for languages, and we just need to do what we ought to do best. We also know that the school in the region is a center of excellence in terms of language teaching, in terms of language research, and in terms of deployment of that language in community outreach. Just continue doing your best. Thank you very much. I wish you very fruitful deliberations, and we hope that this language research continues to enrich our existence, especially as we also face the formidable challenge of decolonizing higher education, of decolonizing knowledge and its production. Thank you very much as we build for the future. On the move.
Thank you very much, our dear Principal, College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Allow me to ask kindly our Dean to come back briefly on stage for some small assignment, which does not fit my shoes, but bigger shoes, professorial shoes. Deanship shoes, she's denying. Hajat shoes. Yes, Madam Dean, please receive our president.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to invite His Excellency, the LAEA President, Professor Justin Sikoko. You are welcome. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you so much, Dean. The principal of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, CHUS, distinguished guests, the local organizing committee, and everybody else who is present in this conference, good morning. My name is Sikuku Justin, currently serving as the president of the Language Association of Eastern Africa. You are welcome to this conference. This is the third conference that is organized by the Language Association of Eastern Africa. So this is a pretty young association. And an idea was conceived in 2017, 2018, because we noticed that there was a gap in terms of bringing scholars that deal with languages of the Eastern African region together. So LAEA was kind of re-energized because it was there initially. Then it died, but it was re-energized. At the beginning, the association brought together, I think, 5 countries, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, and Tanzania. And the objective was mainly to look at the language policies. And from the meetings that they had and from the plans that they had, I think it informed the language policies that we have in different countries today. So we came together mainly to enhance the study of languages and also ensure that we disseminate research. We focus on our languages that have been understudied in a way. But above all, we wanted to establish collaborations. And for the few years that LAEA has been in existence, I think we are doing well. Allow me, how would we have known Professor Edith Natukunda? How would we have known Professor Sauda Namialo? How would we have known all the other scholars? So thank you so much for making us succeed. So allow me to introduce the team that is in the executive of LAEA. It is the pioneer team that has brought the association where it is. So we have the vice president. The vice president, she was outside, Dr. Allen Asimwe. We also have our secretary. Dr. Allen Asimwe is from Makerere. Our secretary, Professor Jen Oduor Ngala, from, they like saying from the University of Nairobi. Then we have our treasurer, Dr. Lynn Kisembe from Moi University. Thank you so much. I'm also from Kenya. I teach syntax and morphology at Moi University. So feel at here. Thank you.
Let's give a big hand clap to the President. His Excellency. So some of these big titles can be met even in academia. If you cannot be the national president, you can be a president at a conference, and it's a big thing. So some of us who are aspiring to become presidents of association, we shall sit closer and tap into the anointing. Thank you very much for those words of wisdom and for the inspiration. Allow me to invite once again Professor Edith Natukunda. Thank you.
Our guests and all protocol observed. In the languages, we always have surprises. So this is a little secret of the country which we have wanted to honor alone. Join me in welcoming Malawi. Malawi oye! Malawi oye! Ra!
Malawi, you are welcome once again. Yes. We are going to skip an item because the person in charge has not arrived yet, but we are optimistic that this person will arrive. So we shall move straight into the program, and we are going to have our first plenary of the keynote speaker, and that is Dr. Susan Nyaga. At this point, allow me invite Dr. Medad Sentanda. Dr. Sentanda, yes, to invite our keynote speaker. Thank you. Makerere oye. Laia Conference oye. Keynote speaker oye. Yes. Let's polish our ears to receive the words of wisdom. Allow me to recognize the presence of the head of department, literature, Dr. Edgar Nabutany is in the house. You can wave to the conference participants. There he is. Allow me also to recognize the presence of our Dean, School of Liberal and Performing Arts, Dr. Pamela Kanahua, she's in the house. Wave to the participants. Other members will be recognized as they come.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my pleasure to chair this opening session this morning on mother tongue advocacy in Africa, which will be presented to us by Dr. Susan Nyaga Anzuruni. Dr. Nyaga's biography is in the abstract book, and I need not to read it to you. But I must say that Dr. Nyaga works with SIL International as a senior literacy and education consultant for Sub-Saharan Africa, and she's the current director at SIL's Institute for Development of Languages and Translation in Africa. SIL is passionate about communities flourishing using their languages. Susan is equally very passionate about mother tongue issues and has a rich experience of developing early grade reading strategies and program plans, training teachers, developing instructional materials in mother tongues, and has been involved in regional, national, and grassroots level advocacy for the use of African languages in education. It is my hope that you are looking forward to her talk just as I am. So Susan, you are very welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Sentanda. The principal, College of Humanities and Social Sciences, the Dean, Chus, I have to remember, Laya, President and Vice President, distinguished scholars, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Laya oye. Chooks oye. Africa oye. African languages oye. I'm very excited to be here this morning to talk about a topic that is in my heart of hearts. I love talking about African languages because I believe African languages is what we need for Africa's development. And because I talk too much about this, and I'm very passionate about it, when I'm invited to do a timed presentation, I keep to my slides because I can go on and on and on. So I will try this morning as much as I can to stick to my slides. I'm going to be presenting on a topic, comparative issues in mother tongue advocacy in Africa. So welcome, let's engage. Setting the stage, what does the global scene look like in terms of languages? Approximately 6,700 languages are spoken around the world today. The linguistic truism holds that there is no concept that cannot be expressed in any language, provided the need to do so arises. The use of languages understood by majority of the population is also the norm rather than the exception. And what does the African scene look like? 30%, that is over 2,000 of the world's languages are spoken on the African continent. Here, the common held view is that certain languages cannot be used to express concepts adequately, especially in science and technology. Across Africa, the idea persists that the international languages of wider communication in Africa, that is Arabic, English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish, are the only means of upward mobility. Africa is also the only continent where the entire population has to struggle to make technological or informational progress through the medium of someone else's language. I would like to elaborate the African scene a little bit. Out of the 54 countries, indigenous languages are recognized as official languages in only 10 countries and Arabic in 9. 46 countries have imported languages as official languages. That is French in 21 countries, English in 19, Portuguese in 5, and Spanish in 1. Unfortunately, only 10 to 15% of the African population are fluent in international languages. This is despite their continued overuse as official languages. What does this mean? It means that Africa consumes, sometimes uncritically, information and knowledge produced elsewhere through languages unknown to the majority of its population. I bring us closer home. In the education domain, statistics show that 221 million of school-aged children in the world today are first language speakers of languages not recognized in the school system. This number could be higher now. Here, Africa is singled out as the only continent in the world where a majority of the children start school using a foreign language. Of the 2,000 plus languages spoken in Africa, only 176 are used in African education systems, and this is mainly in basic education. 25% of these 176 are used in secondary education and a mere 5% in higher education. In sub-Saharan Africa, only 3% of the population of over 800 million people access education through their mother tongue. It is also the case that 22 out of 39 countries in sub-Saharan Africa still use as medium of instruction the language of the former colonial entities. And sadly, no country in the sub-Saharan Africa uses an African language, African indigenous language for instruction at the university level. So given this scenario, questions can then be asked. We have the statistics. We've started from the global. We've come to Africa, and we've delved into our education systems and seen the status of language use and choices in education. Given this, I would like to dwell on 3 questions here. What factors militate against the empowerment of African languages for use in education and in other language use domains in Africa? Can negative attitude towards African languages be changed? It's a good question to ask, because whatever is happening in terms of language choices speaks to negative attitudes towards our own languages. And this third question, What should be the responsibilities of African linguists, educators, scholars in the empowerment of African languages, given the negative attitudes that persist with regard to their use in education, governance, and development? I hope you have been captured in this third question. You are here, maybe I should add researchers, but researchers are also scholars, educators are researchers, linguists are researchers. I added this third question to my talk about advocacy for African languages when my one-time boss presented a paper on when the village professor speaks, who listens? And I knew we, the village speakers, the village professors and doctors from African villages, we have a voice and a responsibility. So let's try to respond to these three questions in the remainder of this presentation. Factors that militate against empowerment of African languages. One of them is the colonial legacy, negative perceptions about multilingualism, language development status of many African languages, national integration versus linguistic diversity, modernization and economic development, defective language planning, negative attitudes, language attitudes, that is. So we are going to look very briefly at each one of these. On the colonial legacy, we know that the objectives are ranged from assimilation to the culture of the occupying power to selective cultivation of an elite that can relate to the masses in their own culture. Different approaches, but the same effect on indigenous languages. Whether it was assimilation or selective cultivation, they all led to the same effects. Partition of Africa resulting in cross-border languages while diminishing the numerical strength of such languages in their territories. When this happens, a cross-border language, which should have been an instrument of integration, becomes an instrument of division, dominated by a dominant language in each territory. The other one is negative perception on multilingualism and linguistic diversity, which is actually supposed to be a resource. Linguistic diversity in Africa is perceived as an inherent problem in matters of communication, governance, and education. Negative perceptions of multilingualism or linguistic diversity serves to diminish the status of African languages, presenting them as a problem rather than the assets they are on the basis of costs and communication. This cost argument ignores the fact that only 10 to 15% of the African population are fluent in all the international languages put together. Ignore all the English we are speaking in this auditorium today and tomorrow, and put together all these people on the African continent that speak the international languages of wider communication. They are only a mere 10 to 15% of the African population. Can that give us the development we seek? We will see as we move on. The communication arguments ignores the multilingualism of many Africans. Very many Africans are multilingual, so we still are able to communicate. Multilingualism contributes to the reinforcement of one's own local identity in order to permit healthy engagement with the rest of the world, and that is its primary advantage relative to globalization. The language development status of African language as being another factor that militates against the use of African languages. And here, African languages are accorded low status on the basis that they need to be developed before they can be used in domains where they have not been used. And the process, as we know it, is you start with orthography development, then there is harmonization of existing orthographies, then there is expansion of vocabulary by creating terminologies to serve wider domains, which is language engineering. There is also the false belief that African languages cannot be used to adequately express concepts in certain domains. But is that true? No, it's not true. The truth is, there is no concepts that cannot be expressed in any language, provided the need to do so arises. So African languages can be used in technology. While we agree that some necessary language development work needs to happen before use is unaccustomed domains, simultaneous use and development is also possible. We do not have to say, let's develop everything about an African language and then we can start using it. We can do these things simultaneously. National integration versus language policy approaches as another factor that militates against the use of African languages. This has to do with multilingualism and the myth, see that I call it a myth, of divisiveness, that one language unites while many languages divide. That's a myth. This myth ignores the fact that this is a superficial unification through an official language involving only a minority who are fluent in such a language. And we remember the statistics, this is only 10 to 15% of the African population. According to Bamboshe, the challenge of integration in Africa is responded to through 3 language policy approaches. The first one of them is the status quo approach, where we feel, no, it's too expensive to try to disturb the existing practice. Let's keep it as it is. That's a status quo approach. Even when we see things are not working, we want to maintain the status quo because change is uncomfortable. Then there's the radical approach where there's an instant departure from what exists. And then there's the gradual approach which avoids instant departure as well as static retention. So you can have a language policy in place, but you do not plan to do anything about it. Or if you do anything about it, you might focus only on basic education or only teaching this language at the basic level or just teaching it as a language but not using it as medium of instruction. And practically, unfortunately, all African countries immediately after independence adopted the status quo approach, which involves retention of the imported colonial languages as official languages. There is the modernization versus economic development as another factor that militates against the use of African languages. Modernization has been defined as the quest for rapid technological and industrial development with a view to not being left behind in the modern world. African languages are ignored in the modernization discourse based on the false belief that economic development is best achieved in an imported language, which is the perceived economic utility of little understood foreign languages in our education systems. Such a language, it is argued, is already widely used in science and technology, and hence the experience gained in the use of languages can be copied, particularly through transfer of technology. So we transfer whatever is happening out there, we want to just transfer it here without making any adaptations or using our languages to do that. What is often ignored in this argument is that only a small part of the populace can be involved in a development strategy based on the use of an imported official language. Why is that? Because development is about people, not systems. Then there's defective language planning as another factor that we had listed. Ideally, proper language planning should ensure that all languages have definite status and specified roles in a multilingual setting, like the African setting. It is, however, the case that in most African countries, language planning processes are defective in that the most commonly encountered situations include the following: policy deficits, where there is actually the absence of policy. It's not declared. People do with language what they want when they want. Then there is propaganda policy. This is a policy in which policymakers have no intention of implementing, but it is only declared for propaganda purposes. We say, because UNESCO has said that it is good to teach in mother tongue when children come to school, we are putting that in our policy. But the following year, when we are doing education planning, we do not allocate any resources at all to make sure that that policy is implemented. Then there is non-implementation, where even when there is a genuine policy in favor of an indigenous language, failure to indicate implementation steps and procedures, as well as adequate provision of funds, may stupefy the policy. In fact, it may rightly be stated that non-implementation is the bane of language planning in Africa. Then there is lack of political will. No immediate results. Some governments just don't want to do anything about languages. So there's no political will at all. And then we have negative attitudes towards languages, our African languages. And language attitudes are very deep-seated. Languages have been shown to impinge in an important way on the reality of a language life, in that negative attitudes towards a language by its speakers may result in language shifts and eventual death, whereas positive attitudes will result in language maintenance. For example, positive attitudes towards indigenous languages are said to have led to their maintenance in India, while negative attitudes have led to the death of many languages in our beloved continent and in Latin America. While the factors already discussed may be beyond the control of the speakers of the language, language attitudes lie squarely within the power of those who own the language, that is, its speakers. Bamboshe asserts that unless speakers take pride in their own language and show a definite desire to preserve it, no amount of external engineering can ensure any status and viable roles for them. In this regard, Baker finds that in attitude change lies one hope for language life and resurrection. This statement holds true to language use in the life of a language in all language use domains. And then there is linguistic nationalism, which is very closely linked to language attitudes. Williams defines linguistic nationalism as that version of nationalism that is concerned about the value of its own language, seeks to defend it against other languages, and encourages its use and enrichment. Here, it has been argued that sub-Saharan Africans are seldom resentful of the use of European languages, even in domains where indigenous languages have been used before. A review of language and education policies in African countries reveals that African governments and language planners introduced languages of European origin much earlier in the education ladder than even the colonialists themselves did, which is evidence of resent for our languages. This detached linguistic nationalism on the part of Africans has led to the hegemony of European languages in African education systems when compared to India, Malaysia, Bangladesh, where strong linguistic nationalism has resulted in the maintenance of autochthonous languages in both formal and informal language use domains. So, given the foregoing revelations, can negative attitudes towards African languages be changed? My answer is a resounding yes, they can. They can be changed. And for the remainder of this address, I'm going to be sharing the case of Kitharaka, a minority language spoken in Kenya. The Kenyan scene, over 60 languages are spoken, most of them by minority people groups. The language in education policy supports mother tongue-based multilingual education as an ideal approach to developing language and literacy skills in the first 3 years of primary school. English and Kiswahili are taught as subjects in those 3 years, after which English takes over as the medium of instruction. Implementation of the stated policy with regard to mother tongue is met with opposition in majority and minority language communities alike, with arguments in favor of English as the medium of instruction from the start. What are the reasons that are given for lack of implementation? Lack of materials to teach the mother tongue and in the mother tongue, negative attitudes towards the mother tongue, lack of teachers trained to teach mother tongue and in mother tongue, and I believe some of you can identify with this in your own countries and languages, lack of appropriate terminology in content areas, publishers unwilling to publish in the mother tongues, and mother tongue is not examinable at the end of primary school. And what does the Tharaka scene look like? Kitharaka remained an oral language until Bible translation and literacy began language development work in the late 1980s. Kimenti, a neighboring language, was taught as mother tongue, in addition to English and Kiswahili as school languages, and Kitharaka remained the home language. This means 4 languages for a little child to grapple with at the age of 5 or 6 years, plus the learning of content and an unfamiliar school environment. The development of an orthography in Kitharaka led to the implementation of a community-initiated mother tongue-based multilingual education program. What was the goal of this program? To enable Tharaka children to achieve academic parity with other Kenyan children who begin schooling in languages they understand. The program implementation plan. Program components address the reasons given in the earlier slide for not implementing the policy. So we looked at materials development, training of teachers, training of teacher trainers, monitoring and evaluation, and advocacy for mother tongue education. And the focus of this address is on the advocacy component because language attitudes, I believe, are the elephant in the room. Why advocacy? What is advocacy? Advocacy is the act of pleading or arguing in favor of something, such as a cause, idea, or policy. It is also a deliberate process whose aim is to inform and influence decision makers by seeking changes that are evidence-based. And finally, it's also been defined as a series of actions taken and issues highlighted to change what is into what should be. And there are 8 stages involved in advocacy, where you first identify the advocacy issue, you set goals and objectives for advocacy, you identify the target audience for advocacy, and this is both the primary and the secondary target audience. Then you shape the message. You build support because you cannot do this alone. Then you design a fundraising strategy for your advocacy campaign. Then you implement the campaign. And at the end, you evaluate the campaign in terms of content, process, and outcome, and change strategy if necessary. So what did we do in Tharaka? And I would like to take us through the expressed attitudes. And I will quote from a few people, things that they had said that helped us understand that we had an advocacy issue. Some of these are translations. So there's only one person in this room who will understand exactly the depth of those quotes when I read them in the mother tongue, but I have given you the translation. And I will try to put a bit of the sarcasm that was in the tone of the person that asked the question. Why are you taking us backwards instead of forward? Teaching in Kitharaka is retrogressive. The world is becoming a global village. Where outside of Tharaka can we use Kitharaka? This is a teacher who was participating in a forum. Another one said, Madam, I tell you the truth, if I find someone telling my standard 1 child, Enoi ng'ombe, that this is a cow, Ito Betania, we will differ very badly, a participating teacher, because they think the child already knows this is a cow, not knowing that the teacher needs to use the fact that they know a cow to talk more about that cow. Another one said, The findings of those researches, the ones that we are talking about here, referring to the studies referred in my presentation at our workshop, they must be wrong. They should be repeated. And another one said, "Ena tankweguai ate orera anto bathomithie na kitharaka. Okay, we kitharaka wathomithirwe na kyo. We guothiete na guku ndenkwegua nuthiaga." That is the sweetness of my language. Now let me try to bring out the same sweetness in English. I know it won't, but let me try. What am I hearing? That you're telling people to teach in Kitharaka? If you had been taught in Kitharaka, would you have been to all those places I hear you have been to? Including Uganda. Okay, those are the expressed attitudes. You can see the negativity already towards the language and the proposal to teach in the language. Why advocacy? The expressed attitudes reveal that providing materials, training teachers and teacher trainers were necessary but not sufficient to assure policy implementation in the case of Kitharaka. Luis asserts that any policy for language, especially in the education system, has to take into account the attitudes of those likely to be affected by it, and that no language policy will succeed if it does not do one of three things. Namely, conform to the expressed attitudes of those involved. Number two, seek to remove the causes of disagreement. Or number three, persuade those who expressed negative attitudes about the rightness of the policy. Well, the first one was to conform to the expressed attitudes of those involved. This wasn't an option to us when we analyzed the Tharaka case. Why? Because studies have shown that there are benefits that accrue to learners who begin schooling in their mother tongue, as advocated in the language in education policy, and we know those benefits. A learner who begins education in a familiar language does not only learn better, but also excels in other academic areas. Learns a second language better, learns to read faster than otherwise. And because we were aware of these benefits, we wanted them for the Tharaka child, so we could not conform to the expressed attitudes. The next thing that we could do would be to seek to remove the causes of disagreement. This too wasn't an option. In our context, removing the causes of disagreement would have meant not teaching the mother tongue as a subject or using it as medium of instruction. But considering the benefits that accrue to a learner who receives instruction in the mother tongue as discussed in the previous slide, we could not remove the causes of disagreement. So this left us with one option. Which option? To persuade. Thank you. So we had to persuade those who express negative attitudes about the rightness of the policy. Those who think that the research should be repeated because the results or the findings are wrong. These became our target audience, who included but were not limited to the following: education officials in the community, head teachers, school management committees, parents, opinion leaders, and religious leaders. The message was based on the proven benefits that accrue to learners who begin schooling in languages they speak and understand, as listed in an earlier slide. The message delivery. How did we deliver this message? We organized advocacy meetings, very many advocacy meetings, where participants were educated on the benefits of mother tongue first. And some of the speakers of in these advocacy meetings were the professors, the village professors that I talked about. Because when a village professor speaks, the community listens. We printed posters and flyers with the message of mother tongue and why it is important. We included a session on the benefits of mother tongue education in the timetables of all teacher trainings, all the writers' workshops that we did to develop the materials. So we basically made advocacy the common theme or the running session in all of the trainings or the meetings that we had with community members. We also made mother tongue education an agenda in every meeting with the education stakeholders. And I would tell you here that I remember one time I was traveling on a bus going to a training, and people started talking about mother tongue and why we are being taken backwards. And I had to stand up like those preachers on the buses and say why it is important. So you use every opportunity you get to talk about it and help people understand. What results did we get after doing all this that we did? A document dubbed the Mother Tongue Education Declaration in Tharaka was born. The document is seen as the culmination of all the advocacy efforts conducted in the community over a period of 6 years. The declaration outlines what needed to be done to ensure that the language in education policy was implemented for the benefit of Tharaka children. As a result of this also, Tharaka became the first community in Kenya to produce school materials in a local language for teaching science, mathematics, social studies, and religious studies in basic education. I'm saying Kenya here, but probably even in Uganda, we don't have such a language yet. As I address you this morning, Kitharaka is one of the 12 languages that has been picked by the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development for further development, owing to the availability of a variety of reading instructional resources in the language. And this includes 3 other minority languages that we worked with after Tharaka. Those 2 are now on the list of the government that initially would prioritize only the dominant languages in the country. In view of this, what should be the responsibility of linguists, educators, researchers, and scholars, like those sitting in this room today, in the empowerment of African languages, given the attitudes that persist with regard to their use in education, governance, and development? My submissions to us: we cannot attain our development goals in languages mastered by only 10 to 15% of the African population. I stand here this morning to challenge African linguists, researchers, educators, scholars, wherever you like, whatever you like to call yourself, and the African village professors, and anyone who cares about the African continent, to stop paying lip service to the development of African languages and move to action to assure their empowerment and use in the different domains for the development of our beloved continent. I call on African linguists, scholars, educators, and everyone gathered here today to awaken their linguistic nationalism and play active roles in the development of African languages while advocating for their use in all domains. And my concluding remarks. In our language garden analogy, this lady Garcia points out that the gardener will need to protect the rare flowers, augment those flowers that are in danger of extinction, and control the flowers that spread very fast. At no time have African languages needed more augmenting and protection from the spread of international languages of wider communication than in this era of globalization. And advocacy for their use in the various domains in the development of the African continent is one way of protecting and augmenting African indigenous languages. Will you stand to be counted? Asante, Ibwega, Murakose, Wevare nyo. Thank you.
Okay, shall we give her another hand of applause? Thank you, Professor Chiguli. Susan, thank you very much for challenging us. If I had to summarize her talk in one sentence, I would say that Susan has invited us to think of our mandate as linguists, as language researchers, on how our mother tongues can contribute to sustainable development. I now want to invite you to comment or discuss this talk. Thank you. Davis, will you help to move the microphone around? Okay, if you will please raise your hand up, he will approach you and then you, yeah. So please go on.
Thank you very much for this very interesting talk, which gives a great summary of why things the way they are and why it's so difficult to change them. And you have focused on language attitudes, which is important, but actually I think there is more that we need to do if we want to win the battle. One of the things that we have to do is to say that, okay, not only is using African languages in all domains desirable, but also we'll have to demonstrate that it is practically possible. We will have to show which languages can be used in which settings in a practical manner. Because people are saying there are 2,000 languages in Africa. Are you going to give medical training, et cetera, in 2,000 languages? How is the practical possibility there? We have to address that. And the other thing that we have to do, I think, is to say that if we want to achieve the goal, the Sustainable Development Goal of education for all, that current educational systems will not be able to deliver that using these foreign languages. So African educational systems will not be able to expand indefinitely to the size that will be needed by using foreign languages. So that change, as development progresses, is going to become not only desirable, but also inevitable. Sooner or later, it's going to have to happen one way or another. So I think those are two elements that need to be added to the attitude method. But otherwise, we're in the same boat. Thank you.
Any other hand? Yes.
Hello. My name is Kwame Samoa. I'm from University of Ghana Business School. I'm here as a visiting professor, and I'm happy to be part of this conversation. And I thank the speaker so much. She has brought out some very critical issues, and I thank you so much. But the issue of practicability has been spoken of, and another issue that I want us to consider is that it appears we don't have a lot of opportunities in the continent, and most of our children, after completion of school, want to travel outside. And where I come from, Ghana, a lot of students do want to go to the United States of America, UK, and so on and so forth for further studies. So the question that usually comes up is that then what is the relevance of the mother tongue? And when you gave the statistics also, one interesting thing that you mentioned is that even in our universities, we don't find it important for us to use the mother tongue. And even for your presentation, it was during the latter part when we were talking about advocacy, when you started bringing in some of the indigenous language. So the question is, are we just having just a workshop or a seminar or a conference, or are we going to start from here? Because I was expecting that some of the sentences that you put forward, at least you put some in some of our indigenous languages here. I like Asante Sana, I know of Jambo, these are very, Ubuntu, these are very wonderful expressions. So I was expecting that. So if you are talking about advocacy, then it is imperative that we start from here, because we are not going to leave it to other people. And my last issue that I want to talk about is that you gave us 3 scenarios. If you want to change it, you asked whether we should adopt a radical approach, right, or gradual, or do we maintain the status quo? So which one can you advance for us? Which one of the 3 we should take? I think I would like to end here, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nyaga, for that insightful presentation. It's true, our local languages must take their rightful place. I totally agree. However, Prof, I would like to listen in to your thinking or your thoughts about English, specifically on the matter of varieties of English, especially second language varieties of English. We know the role some of the so-called international languages play in the world today. And we cannot run away from the fact that English plays a major role in the world today. Now, when we localize varieties of English, for instance, I come from Kenya. Sorry, I should have introduced myself. My name is Furaha from Moi University. In Kenya, we speak a variety of English we call Kenyan English. It's easily identifiable as Kenyan. Similarly, in Uganda here, when Ugandans speak their English or their variety of English, it's very easy to identify that variety as Ugandan. It's got certain features, linguistic features, that characterize it
differently from other varieties of English. Now, these varieties of English that are second language varieties are unique. There's something unique about Ugandan English that identifies the Ugandan people, for instance. Something unique about Kenyan, South African, Nigerian English. Prof, I would like to know your take on whether or not these varieties of English also have a place beside our local African languages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, one more question and then she would respond.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Nyaga, for that amazing presentation. My name is Annette Kahunde. I teach at Kabaale University. There is something that you mentioned in one of your lines that really caught my attention. You said that we should stop paying lip service to the development of African languages. Now, I would like to thank the linguists in this room. We have done a good job in African languages. We have documented our languages. We are doing good work to develop the theories that are in place. But I think as African linguists, there is something that I have observed that is lacking in us. Yes, we are documenting this work, and in a way I feel that we are paying lip service to the development of African languages. Why am I saying this? We are the very people who speak the English languages, the English language in our homes. Our children speak English language. We speak to them in the English language. We take them to these international schools or these, well-to-do schools where English is spoken. And yet we are going out to the communities and saying, look here, our languages are important. We need to develop them. We need to speak them. So I think we need to move from this lip service thing of developing our languages through documenting them, writing them, making this advocacy, but also go ahead and be able to use them in our languages so that we can, show the people in our communities that these languages are indeed important. But one of the things that I've actually realized that some of us are not even fluent in our own languages, the African languages that we are so much developing. Our children cannot speak their own languages. And I think that's a very, very big embarrassment to us. So let us stop paying lip service to the development of African languages, and we should walk the talk. Thank you very much.
Okay, I suggest we let Susan respond to what we've submitted, and then we take another round. Thank you.
Thank you. I see I have a fellow advocate in the house. Thank you, the last commenter. The first person that spoke, I think yours was a comment, not really a question. You were adding something about practicability. Then the second person from Ghana, sorry I didn't get your name. You asked about our children who want to go to study in America, and so they need the English. And this is one of the misconceptions that we have to grapple with on the African continent, that every time when we talk about mother tongue education, we tend to think that we are speaking about the exclusion of the international languages of wider communication. I think the campaign that is on and has been on for the longest time is for us to allow our children to begin learning in languages they speak and understand so that they can participate in class, understand what they are learning while they are learning these other languages, And when they have learned these languages, they can be used as medium of instruction. That is not to say that we cannot develop an African language to the point that we are teaching technology in that language. But we are saying, give these children the right foundation. If you want them to speak good English, give them the right foundation in the language that they first learned to express themselves in. When I was newly introduced to this field, I met a professor from the University of Ibadan, Professor Ayeba Mboshe. And he said that when they were doing I think I talked about the Fafunwa study, I cited it in my presentation. When that study was happening, it was conceived at the university, and professors at the university were going to allow their children to be taught in the mother tongue while learning English. And when the program started, there was going to be another set of children who are learning in English only. But when the program started, some of the professors went and withdrew their children from this program of mother tongue while learning English and took them to the English only. Because I believe they were thinking, what if it doesn't work? What will happen to our children? But who should be the first person to believe in their research? It is us. We should be the first people to believe in our own research findings. We have already seen so much evidence that when a child begins in the language they speak and understand, even the learning of English, they will score better in English than that child who is doing English only, but they don't go to school speaking English. And when I got my own children who are very young, they are 8 years and 6 years, I decided, how about practicing what I preach out there in my own house? And my husband is not Kenyan, so our common language apart from English is Kiswahili, which is, praise God, an African language. So we agreed with my husband, they are growing up in Nairobi, but we are going to teach them in their first language will be Kiswahili. And there were so many reasons that made us make that decision, apart from me preaching wine and drinking it, or preaching water and drinking it, not the other way around. And trust you me, our children became very expressive. I could check with against the children who are being spoken to English at home. They are brought a nanny who doesn't speak English, so they are lost somewhere. My children, they have a nanny who is speaking Kiswahili to them. My husband and I are speaking Kiswahili to them. They became so expressive at a very early stage. In fact, my daughter Tumaini would speak and people are like, how old is this child? I tell them 2 years and they are like, you're kidding. A 2-year-old cannot be speaking in sentences. When Tumaini started learning English, she was learning English in sentences. She tells me, Iki ni kiti. How do I say that in English? She learned English very quickly. And I have seen it practically in my own house, what we preach to people. In fact, sometimes I talk about it and become very emotional because I'm like, why aren't parents getting this? You know? Anyway, let me not go on and on. So if you want your children to speak good English in America, allow them to establish the foundation in their mother tongue, in the first language that they are speaking first, before you plunge them into English. You asked about the status approach, the status quo approach, the gradual approach, and the radical approach. This was actually an analysis of what happened in terms of language policies when we became independent nations. So it wasn't like a recommendation of this is how we should address it. It was an analysis of the language policies following the... I hope I have answered you. Varieties of English. Someone from, I think it was Furaha, from Moi University. You talked about variety of English. You talked about the role English plays in the world today. And I think I've responded to your question partly in my response to the professor from Ghana, that we are not talking about exclusion of English and other international languages. We are talking about giving our children the solid foundation that they need. But also, we could go beyond giving the foundation to empowering some of our African languages to be used in technology and in other areas, in other language use domains. On the varieties of English, even if you go to the US today, the English spoken in California is not the English spoken in New York. If you go to the UK today, I went to school, I studied in Yorkshire, and I used to tell the people from the UK, those who come from West Yorkshire, you must be the people who went to Nigeria and taught Nigerians English, because they were saying boss, mustard, custard, money, mother, love. Hello? That is the UK. I had to tune my ear to hear that English spoken in Yorkshire, which is different from what is spoken in London. And if you go to Wales, I hear is the same. If you go to Ireland, there are those differences. So let the varieties be, I would say. Finally, it was about the lip service. Thank you for pointing that out. I think you've brought out very clearly. Yesterday in the session, we talked about research. We do not do research for research's sake. Our theme is empowering communities through language research and teaching for sustainable development. Are we just going to research African languages and produce research report after research report after research reports? Or can we go beyond research and try to do something to make a difference about my own language? If people do not like speaking Kitharaka, if we had just done research and stopped there, Kitharaka would not be among the 12 languages that are being developed further by the government of Kenya today, because the availability of those resources that we are able to develop is what has made Kitharaka to rise to the national level, which was not the case before that. What can you do about your language? Can you write stories for children in your language as a starting point? Can you talk to people? If you hear people talking negatively about our local languages and saying that they are the ones causing tribalism, especially for those of us who come from Kenya, can you nip that conversation before it even proceeds? Because languages are not tribal. It is the people that are tribal. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. In the interest of time, we will ask Professor Hichire, please, to ask your question, and then later we want to ask you to invite the guest of honor, because we are hungry and we are getting into the next session.
Hierarchies. There were many burning questions around there. I can donate my minute. I just wanted to say that you have awakened our linguistic nationalism sensibilities. And I think the more we name it, the more we research it, the more it will become a reality. I was just looking at our poster there on Center for Languages and Communication Services, the services we offer. First, foreign languages, which are, put there, and then local languages, and they are put there, and others. And I said, this is where we need to start. We have to really be attentive to some of these hierarchies and ensure that maybe instead of saying foreign and local, let's name the African languages. Can I donate 1 minute to the head of African languages? Please make sure it's 1 minute.
Thank you, Principal and the organizers. My name is Gilbert Gumoshabe. I'm the head of African languages. And Professor Susan may be to say that I was the first person in the world to get a master's in Runyachitara, a local language in Uganda. I can't say more than what you have said. Maybe to add that those who are advocating for those languages, my research tells me that there is no single country in the world that has developed using a foreign language. None. All countries have indigenized knowledge. But we have been told to catch up with the development, we must use foreign languages. In other words, when they are far, we are still trying to understand what they are saying. What do we need? A roadmap of how far we can make our languages scientific and participate in technological developments. That is what we need as of now. The issue of saying that the African languages are many. How many languages are in Europe? Do they have a single language? The French have gone their way. The Danish have gone their way. Even Iceland, with a population of 330,000 people, they use Icelandic. So where are we? What we need is a roadmap with our different languages on how far we can go. 20 years from now, development is always evolving, moving forward. How do we move with that development? By indigenizing knowledge. And the best way to go is using our local languages. We must bring everybody on board, not only having this English for literacy purposes, where you can read, write, and count. Read what has been written, write what you are understanding, and count, not knowing how that money you are counting has been made. Many people have to be, those who are in artisan, those who understand what to do, they do it using local languages. Most of us here, we think in our local languages before you can see the last word has failed because I was trying to get it from my Runyankore into English. So your keynote was outstanding. We wake up, have a roadmap. I thank you.
Thank you. This debate is very long, I understand, but I want to ask that we continue with it at the break time. Professor, if you will please invite the guest of honor. If you will please invite our guest.
Okay, once again, karibuni. Oh yeah, I'm learning. I'm a quick runner. I take this opportunity to invite Professor Robert Wamala, who is a Deputy Director in the Directorate of Research and Graduate Training. But in this capacity here, He's representing the Deputy Vice Chancellor in charge of academic affairs, and which, docket conferences as academic events fall. So we are very glad that you're able to make it. We know that there are many conversations taking place, including budget cuts, but you're here. You're welcome to address the participants. Thank you. Choose on the move.
Choose on the move. In light of the comments raised on the keynote speech, I probably think I should have used Luganda to make my remarks. And nevertheless, I will borrow words from, I didn't get to know his name, but I probably use Ugandan English to deliver my remarks. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Susan Nyanga Azuruni, and Dr. Alena Vitslak Makelvich, I hope I pronounced that right. The members of Makerere University Management, the principal of the College of Humanities, the LAHEA president, the deans and heads of department, members of Makerere University community present, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great honor and pleasure to welcome researchers, academicians, language practitioners, and well-wishers here in Makerere University to the 3rd biennial conference of the Language Association of Eastern Africa on the theme, I quote, empowering communities through language research and African linguistics for sustainable development, end of quote. This theme rhymes well with the Makerere University Directorate of Graduate Research and Training plan, which intends to foster and manage graduate training and research by university units by promoting quality research, publications, and dissemination of knowledge and innovations to meet the changing needs of society and for sustainable development. Like has been said earlier, Africa has an estimated 2,140 distinct languages. All 1/3 of all languages in the world, despite only having 1/7 of the global population. With the emerging discourse of language management and the increasing realization of the strategic role that languages play in the multinational and supranational power relations, researchers in Africa should be aiming to understand its diversity of language contexts and grasp how individuals acquire and use these multiple languages. As director and in a way as DVC of research and academics at Makerere University, I am an avid follower of world language debates. The problem is that much of the acclaimed published languages and linguistics research is not conducted in the world's most multilingual societies like our region of Eastern Africa. As observed in the LAHEA call for abstracts for this conference, recent empirical evidence shows that North America and Western Europe are the primary locations of research on multilingualism. Consequently, studies published in smaller, low-impact journals, where many of our resource-constrained researchers are located, may be less likely to shape the field of language and linguistic research. In order to address this identified geographical bias, we at Makerere University have gone to the extent of requesting the government of Uganda to establish the Research and Innovation Fund, that is called MACRIF. So since 2019, MACRIF has funded a total of up to about 800 projects across all sectors, critical for development in order to address the systematic inequalities in research, which I note will be targeted in this Lihaya conference. This conference, which will concretize big team research, in which many societies and practitioners spread across institutions and locations are working together. Collaborations between North and South will also help address the above-mentioned geographical imbalance. With Lihaya and similar efforts, the field of language and linguistics ought to diversify in the years to come, and thus increase the validity of our knowledge in Eastern African region, as well as the contribution of local, national, and regional languages. Once again, I thank you for your kind invitation and wish you a fruitful Lihaya conference as we build for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Sarah, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Susan Nyaga, for this inspirational talk. We really feel inspired, and our linguistic nationalism has been aroused. And I know we shall not do lip service like my sister mentioned. We shall, do greater than what we have been doing. Issues of mother tongue are sensitive, and we all know this very well. Thank you, dear participants, for your participation and for your active questions and interesting concerns. This marks the end of the first session, and before we break off, allow me to recognize the presence of the following. One, Dr. David Majariwa, who is the Director, Institute of Languages, Kabale University in Uganda. You are most welcome. Phil at Lihaya Conference. Allow me to recognize the presence of Dr. Levis Mogumia, the Head of Department, Linguistics, English Language and Communication Skills. That is my immediate boss. Also allow me to recognize the presence of the former Head of Department, Literature, Professor Susan Chiguli. She's my immediate neighbor at office. And allow me to recognize the presence of the online community. We love you so much. Thank you very much for being part of the community. Yes, the audience is smiling, and I'm sending these warm smiles to you. Students in the house, you are most welcome. Students from the School of Languages, Literature, and Communication. It has been lovely to have this morning session with our keynote speaker. Yes, how could I not see? Ladies and gentlemen, we have another important participant in the house, who is Professor Abbas Chimba, our academic papa. He's a super mentor and also my immediate neighbor. Yes, I'm just surrounded by, anointing. Very soon you'll hear Professor. Yes, so I now hand over to my colleague to brief you on what next. Thank you very much. Let us clap for ourselves for doing so well for that first session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah Nakijova. Laya oye! Laya oye! I can tell you haven't had breakfast. Okay, briefly allow me to recognize Dr. Pamela Kanakwa, the Dean of the School of Liberal and Performing Arts. You're most welcome. And then Dr. Gilbert Gumushavi, the head of Department of African Languages. You're most welcome to this session. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break off for tea, for a quick tea. However, we'd like to have a group photo before we go for tea. And we will take the group photo from right here. And then tea is at the back. We'll start with our guests going first after the group photo. So tea is at the back. Right after the tea, we'll break into plenary. We have the chairs of the different sessions. So we have room 3.1, seminar room 3.1, room 3.2, just upstairs. You follow the steps on the third level. And then the fourth level, we have 4.2 and 5.1. And then we have 5.2 on the fifth level. And then the other session will be in the auditorium here. So please, you can keep here if you prefer to stay right here. And the chairs are around. I've seen Dr. Isaac Tibasima, Dr. John Chintu, Dr. David Majaliwa, Dr. Enoch Sebuyungo, and Dr. Celestino Olikiliza, and Professor Alena right here. So let's take a group photo, and then we break off for tea. Thank you so much. Yeah, all of us. The cameraman, okay. The cameraman is right here in the middle. Yes. Yes.